people ask me, they said, Barack, why are you running this time? Why are you running so soon? You're a relatively young man. You can afford to wait. And I had to explain that I did not decide to run because of some long-held ambition. I know that people have been looking through my kindergarten papers, but that's not why I decided to run. I am not running because I think it's somehow owed to me, because I think it's my turn. I am running because of what Dr. King called the fierce urgency of now. The fierce urgency of now. My faith in the American people has been vindicated because I have traveled all across the country, and everywhere I go, the American people insist that they are ready for something new. It is time to turn the page and write a new chapter in American history. You know, during some of our rallies, I was seeing some Republicans. I told the reporters, they would say, no, Republicans don't come to Democratic rallies. I said, listen, when I'm shaking hands afterwards, I know because they whisper to me, they say, Barack, I'm a Republican, but I support you. And I would say, thank you. Why are we whispering? But on that caucus night in Iowa, they weren't whispering, they were coming up and shouting, hey Barack, I'm a Republican, but I'm here, I changed registrations because I think this country is due for a change. So we've been seeing levels of participation in all the early elections that we have never seen in this generation. I would love to take all the credit for it. I would love to take all the credit for it, but let's face it, part of the reason that all of you are here today, part of the reason that everybody's so interested in this election, is they know that whatever else happens, when they go into the polling place this November, the name George W. Bush will not be on the ballot. I opposed this war in Iraq from the start. I opposed this war because it was an unwise war. And I will bring this war to a close, and I will bring our troops home in 2009, because it's time the Iraqis stood up and negotiated an agreement. We will not have permanent bases and a permanent occupation of Iraq. We will no longer spend $9 billion a day, because we need to spend $9 billion here in the United States of America, rebuilding roads and bridges and schools and hospitals. You know, I talk about hope a lot in my campaign. And I talk about hope out of necessity because if you think about it, the odds of me standing here before you are pretty slim. You know, I wasn't born into money, I wasn't born into fame or fortune. I was born to a teenage mom. My dad left me when I was 2 years old. I was raised by a single mother and my grandparents. And they didn't have a lot, but they gave me love, they gave me an education, and they gave me hope. That's right. So, it's true, I talk about hope a lot. I've got hope on my signs. I gave this speech at the Boston Convention about hope, and I wrote a book called The Audacity of Hope. But I noticed lately, we've been seeing some criticisms where Senator Clinton and others say, oh, he talks about hope so much. He's so naive. He's a talker, not a doer. He's a hope monger. He's peddling false hopes. He needs a reality check. he's not clear, he's not realistic. Well, the implication is that somehow if you talk about hope, you must be engaging in wishful thinking, that you must be passive, that you're just going to sit back and wait for things to happen to you, that you're shirking from a fight, that you're not willing to struggle. That's not what hope is. Hope is not blind optimism. Hope is not ignorance of the barriers that stand in your way. Hope is not avoiding the difficulties that inevitably come in any worthwhile endeavor. Hope's just the opposite. I know how hard it's going to be to provide health care to every American. The insurance, the drug companies, they will not give up their profits easily. I know how hard it will be to craft an energy policy that makes sense. ExxonMobil likes those profits. I know how difficult it will be to put young men and women who are standing on street corners in the inner city back on a pathway to success in life. Some of that poverty is deep-rooted, and there's still some selfishness in this society that says that's not our problem. I know how difficult it is to lift our schools up because we don't like having to pay for somebody else's child. And sometimes all of us shirk responsibility for our children. But I know how hard these things are because I have fought on the streets of Chicago as a community organizer. I have fought in the courts as a civil rights attorney. I have fought in the legislature, and I've passed some good legislation, but I've seen good legislation die because good intentions were not enough. They were not fortified with political will or political power. I've seen this country's judgment clouded by fear, a politics of fear that uses tragedies like 9/11 to scare up votes instead of bring this country together around a common purpose. I know how hard change is, but I also know this, that nothing worthwhile in this country has ever happened except somebody somewhere was willing to hope. That is how this nation was founded. A group of patriots like Mr. Rodney, declaring independence, standing up to the mighty British Empire. Nobody gave them a chance. That's how the slaves and abolitionists resisted our wicked system, and how a new president charted a course to ensure this nation would not remain half slave and half free. That's how the greatest generation, my grandfather fighting in Patton's army, my grandmother staying behind with a baby, working on a bomber assembly line, how that generation defeated fascism and Hitler and lifted itself up out of a Great Depression. That's how pioneers traveled west. That's how immigrants came from distant shores. That's how women won the right to vote. That's how workers won the right to organize. That's how young people traveled south and they marched and they sat in and they suffered fire hoses and attack dogs, and some went to jail and some died for freedom's cause. That's what hope is. That is what hope is. Imagining and then fighting for, then struggling for what did not seem possible before. And that is the moment that we are in right now.